Tonight, the world is waking to scenes of devastation and grief from southern Iran, where at least 153 people, including a large number of children, are reported to have been killed after a strike hit a girls' school in the town of Minab. The attack, described by Iranian officials as one of the deadliest incidents in recent days, has sent shockwaves across the region and intensified an already rapidly escalating conflict involving Iran, the United States, and Israel. According to Iranian authorities, the school, located in Hormuzgan province near a base of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, was struck by what officials say were 3 missile attacks. The blasts tore through the building during Iran's 6-day working week when the school was likely occupied. Rescue workers, emergency crews, and volunteers rushed to the scene as smoke billowed into the sky and panicked voices echoed through the streets. Verified footage from the aftermath shows crowds gathering around the damaged structure, with screams and sirens filling the air. Iran has directly blamed both the United States and Israel for the strike. The country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, condemned the attack as a barbaric act and described it as another black page in the record of countless crimes committed by the aggressors. Meanwhile, the United States Military Central Command, CENTCOM, has stated that it is looking into reports of the incident. In a statement reported in American media, a spokesperson said the U.S. takes such reports seriously and emphasized that the protection of civilians remains of utmost importance. Israel's military, for its part, has said it is not aware of any Israeli Defense Forces operations in the area. The tragedy in Minab comes amid a broader wave of airstrikes across multiple Iranian cities. According to the Iranian Red Crescent, at least 201 people have been killed and more than 700 injured since Saturday in strikes across the country. Humanitarian teams from the Red Cross and Red Crescent have mobilized to respond to the growing crisis. However, key details remain difficult to verify independently. International news organizations often face visa restrictions in Iran, limiting their ability to confirm casualty figures or assess damage on the ground. While outrage has spread across Iranian social media, deep mistrust of the Iranian government has also fueled skepticism among some citizens, with questions emerging about responsibility, preparedness, and civilian protection. As tensions escalate and accusations fly, the strike on the Minab school risks becoming a defining and deeply emotional turning point in a conflict that is already reshaping the region. What exactly happened? Who is responsible? And what does this mean for the future of an increasingly volatile confrontation? The strike that hit the girls' school in Minab unfolded against the backdrop of intensifying military operations across Iran. According to Iranian officials, the attack occurred on Saturday during active school hours, part of Iran's 6-day working week that runs from Saturday through Thursday. Friday is the only official day of rest, making it highly likely that classrooms were occupied at the time of impact. Initial reports from local authorities indicate that the school was struck by 3 separate missile attacks. Officials in Hormuzgan province described the explosions as occurring within moments of each other, suggesting either a coordinated strike or a rapid succession of impacts. The building, located approximately 600 meters from an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, suffered catastrophic structural damage. Windows were blown out across neighboring buildings, debris scattered across nearby streets, and sections of the school reported collapsed. Within minutes of the explosions, emergency response teams began arriving at the scene. The Iranian Red Crescent said it immediately mobilized local disaster response units. Ambulances transported the injured to nearby hospitals, while volunteers and bystanders attempted to pull survivors from beneath rubble. Witnesses described scenes of panic and chaos, with parents rushing toward the school grounds after hearing the blasts. Video footage verified by international media organizations shows thick smoke rising from the damaged structure. In the clips, crowds gather near the site as sirens wail in the background. People can be heard shouting and crying. Dust fills the air. Parts of the building appear blackened and partially destroyed. However, while these visuals confirm that an explosion occurred, independent verification of the official death toll remains challenging. Iranian authorities have stated that at least 153 people were killed in the school strike alone, many of them children. If confirmed, this would make it one of the deadliest single incidents involving civilians in the current escalation. The Iranian Red Crescent has reported that across the country at least 201 people have died and 747 have been injured since Saturday as a result of airstrikes. Hospitals in Hormuzgan province reported declared emergency protocols. Medical staff were said to be working around the clock, treating victims suffering from blast injuries, burns, and trauma-related conditions. Blood donation drives were organized, and local mosques and community centers were reported open to assist families searching for missing relatives. The proximity of the school to an IRGC base is a central factor in understanding the incident. The base has reportedly been targeted in previous military operations, is located less than 600 meters from the school grounds. Military analysts note that such close positioning of civilian infrastructure near strategic military facilities increases the risk of unintended casualties in the event of airstrikes. However, it remains unclear whether the missiles were aimed at the school itself, the nearby base, or another target in the vicinity. The United States Military Central Command has stated that it is reviewing reports of the incident. In a public statement, Tim Hawkins emphasized that the U.S. takes such allegations seriously and prioritizes civilian protection. Israel's military has said it is not aware of any Israeli Defense Forces operations in the area at the time of the incident. These statements leave open multiple possibilities, including misidentification of targets, intelligence errors, technical malfunction, or involvement of other actors. Adding further complexity is the broader military context. Saturday saw wave after wave of reported airstrikes across several Iranian cities. These operations followed the reported killing of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei in an earlier airstrike, alongside several senior commanders. That development marked a dramatic escalation in the confrontation between Iran and its adversaries, raising fears of wider regional war. In the hours after the Minab tragedy, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian addressed the nation, calling the strike a barbaric act. State media broadcast images of rescue efforts and grieving families, framing the attack as evidence of what officials describe as aggression against Iranian civilians. At the same time, questions have emerged domestically. Some Iranian citizens have criticized authorities for failing to provide sufficient warnings or for keeping schools open amidst escalating military strikes. Social media posts reflected anger not only towards external actors, but also towards internal leadership, highlighting concerns about civil defense preparedness, lack of shelters, and reported communication disruptions. The internet and some phone lines were reportedly cut in certain areas during the strikes, complicating communication between families and emergency services. In such an environment, information spreads quickly, but not always reliably, fueling both grief and suspicion. As investigations begin and international scrutiny intensifies, the events in Minab stand as a tragic focal point in a rapidly widening conflict. Determining exactly what happened, whether the school was directly targeted, struck accidentally, or caught in crossfire, will be central to the global response in the days ahead. As the dust settled over the shattered remains of the girls' school in Minab, a fierce battle of narratives began unfolding alongside the military confrontation itself. Within hours of the strike, Iranian officials publicly blamed both the United States and Israel, accusing them of carrying out what they described as a deliberate attack on civilians. The accusations came amid one of the most volatile periods in recent Middle Eastern history, with open hostilities intensifying between Iran and its long-standing adversaries. Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, addressed the nation in a televised statement, calling the strike a barbaric act and describing it as another black page in the record of countless crimes committed by the aggressors. State media echoed this message, portraying the school attack as part of a broader campaign of destruction targeting Iranian infrastructure and civilians. However, responses from Washington and Tel Aviv introduced uncertainty into the narrative. The United States military's Central Command, known as CENTCOM, issued a statement saying it was reviewing reports of the incident. Spokesman Tim Hawkins emphasized that the U.S. takes allegations of civilian harm seriously and reiterated that the protection of civilians remains a priority in military operations. Notably, the statement did not confirm involvement nor deny it outright, instead signaling that an internal assessment was underway. Israel's military response was more direct, stating it was not aware of any Israeli Defense Forces operations in the Minab area at the time of the strike. This wording, while not a categorical denial, suggested either non-involvement or a lack of operational activity in that specific location. The broader context is critical. The strike occurred during a wave of reported air operations across multiple Iranian cities. According to Iranian sources, these strikes followed the reported killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, in a separate airstrike earlier in the escalation. That event alone would represent a seismic geopolitical shift, dramatically altering the balance of power within Iran and potentially triggering retaliation on an unprecedented scale. Military analysts suggest that in high-intensity conflict environments, especially those involving strategic military targets such as IRGC bases, the margin for error narrows considerably. The Minab school's location, roughly 600 meters from an IRGC installation, has become central to discussions about whether the school was directly targeted or struck as collateral damage during an operation aimed at the nearby base. The IRGC, or Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, plays a pivotal role in Iran's military and political structure. It oversees strategic weapons programs, regional proxy forces, and key security operations. As a result, its bases are frequently identified as high-value targets by adversaries. The placement of civilian infrastructure in close proximity to military facilities complicates targeting decisions and increases the risk of unintended civilian casualties. International humanitarian law requires combatants to distinguish between military objectives and civilian objects and to take precautions to minimize civilian harm. If the strike on the school is determined to have been deliberate, it could constitute a serious violation of international law. If it was unintended, investigators would examine whether sufficient precautions were taken and whether the proportionality of the strike was assessed correctly. The lack of independent verification remains a significant obstacle. International journalists and human rights monitors often face severe restrictions operating inside Iran. Visa denials, limited access to strike sites, and communication disruptions hinder external investigations. This environment creates space for competing narratives to flourish without immediate clarity. Meanwhile, diplomatic reactions have begun to emerge globally. Some governments have called for restraint and independent investigations into the incident. Humanitarian organizations have urged all parties to prioritize civilian protection and to allow safe access for medical and relief workers. Social media has amplified the emotional intensity of the moment. Images and clips circulating online have triggered widespread outrage, particularly over reports that many victims were school-aged girls. Yet alongside grief and anger, skepticism persists. Deep trust of the Iranian regime, both domestically and among the diaspora, has led some to question official casualty figures and the broader framing of the event. Some Iranian citizens have directed criticism towards their own government, arguing that schools should have been closed amidst escalating airstrikes. Others have raised concerns about the reported lack of air raid shelters, warning systems, and communication networks during active military operations. Reports that internet access and phone lines were disrupted in some areas have further fueled frustration.
The information battle is now almost as intense as the military one. Each side faces enormous strategic stakes. For Iran, portraying the strike as an attack on children strengthens its moral argument internationally and may galvanize domestic unity. For the United States and Israel, avoiding confirmation of civilian casualties, particularly in a school setting, is crucial to maintaining international support. As investigations proceed and tensions continue to rise, the Minab tragedy sits at the center of a rapidly expanding geopolitical storm. Determining who launched the strike, whether it was intentional or accidental, and what intelligence guided the operation will shape the next phase of this conflict, both militarily and diplomatically. Beyond the geopolitical accusations and military calculations, the tragedy in Minab has unleashed a profound humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in real time. For families in Hormozgan province, the strike on the girls' school is not a matter of strategy or diplomacy. It is a personal catastrophe marked by grief, confusion, and unanswered questions. Hospitals across the region were reportedly overwhelmed within hours of the explosions. Medical staff worked under emergency protocols, treating patients suffering from blast trauma, shrapnel wounds, burns, and severe psychological shock. According to Iranian Red Crescent officials, response teams were mobilized immediately, with additional units dispatched from neighboring areas to support local capacity. Rescue operations extended late into the night. Volunteers joined emergency workers in searching through debris, calling out for survivors trapped beneath collapsed sections of the school. Parents gathered outside hospital entrances, waiting for news about missing children. Some reportedly moved from one medical facility to another in search of information, as communication disruptions complicated coordination efforts. The Iranian Red Crescent has stated that since Saturday, at least 201 people have been killed and 747 injured in airstrikes across the country. The Minab school incident represents a significant portion of those casualties. However, international observers note that independent confirmation of the exact figures remains difficult due to limited media access and ongoing security restrictions. For many Iranians, the emotional shock of children being killed inside a school has intensified public outrage. Social media platforms, where accessible, have been flooded with messages of mourning and anger. Images of smoke rising from the damaged building, coupled with reports that the victims included school-aged girls, have deeply affected public sentiment. One Iranian living abroad who publicly opposes foreign military intervention wrote, "The first victims of this war are 40 girls in Minab hit by a missile attack. Is this the war you cheer for?" The comment reflects the painful tension felt by many in the Iranian diaspora, caught between opposition to their government and fear of external military escalation. Yet anger has not been directed solely outward. A significant number of Iranian social media users have questioned their own government's preparedness and crisis management. Some critics argue that amid escalating airstrikes across multiple cities, authorities should have suspended normal operations, including keeping schools open. In Iran's 6-day working week, Saturday is a regular school day. With hostilities intensifying, critics say there should have been clearer warnings to parents and institutions. One social media user wrote, "People have no shelters, the internet is cut, phone lines are down, and there has been no warning to keep children out of school. In these conditions, the minimum requirement should be to stay at home." These comments highlight long-standing concerns about civil defense infrastructure. Unlike some countries with established air raid shelter systems or nationwide warning alerts, Iran's civilian protection mechanisms are even and not always publicly visible. In high-density urban areas, the risk of collateral damage increases significantly when military facilities are located near residential zones, schools, or hospitals. Reports that internet access and phone services were disrupted in certain areas following the strikes have further fueled public anxiety. Communication blackouts, whether intentional for security reasons or caused by infrastructure damage, leave families unable to confirm the safety of loved ones. In crisis situations, such uncertainty magnifies psychological trauma. International humanitarian organizations have emphasized the urgent need for protected medical access and transparent casualty reporting. The International Committee of the Red Crescent and Red Crescent officials in Geneva stated that response teams had been mobilized to assist in Minab. However, ongoing military operations complicate relief efforts. The humanitarian consequences extend beyond immediate casualties. Trauma among surviving students, teachers, and families is likely to have long-term psychological effects. Mental health professionals note that children exposed to violent conflict often experience anxiety disorders, depression, and post-traumatic stress symptoms that can persist for years. The broader Iranian population is also navigating a climate of fear. Airstrikes reported in multiple cities have disrupted daily routines. Businesses have closed early. Families are reconsidering travel. Parents face difficult decisions about whether to send children to school amid uncertainty. At the same time, deep mistrust of official narratives remains a powerful undercurrent. Iran has a complex political landscape, with segments of the population skeptical of state media and government statements. In the absence of independent verification, some citizens question casualty figures or suspect political motives behind public messaging. This combination of grief, fear, skepticism, and anger creates a volatile domestic atmosphere. Historically, civilian casualties during external conflict can either strengthen national unity or deepen internal divisions, depending on public perception of leadership response and accountability. For now, Minab has become a symbol of loss, of vulnerability, and of the human cost of geopolitical confrontation. While military leaders debate strategy and governments issue statements, ordinary families are left to bury their dead and ask a painful question: could this have been prevented? As the humanitarian toll grows and pressure mounts for answers, the internal strain within Iran may prove as consequential as the external conflict itself. The strike on the girls' school in Minab is not an isolated tragedy. It is unfolding within a rapidly expanding regional confrontation that threatens to redraw the strategic map of the Middle East. With Iran blaming the United States and Israel, and both countries navigating carefully worded responses, the risk of escalation now looms larger than at any point in recent years.
The broader military campaign that preceded and followed the Minab incident involved wave after wave of airstrikes across multiple Iranian cities. These operations, according to Iranian authorities, intensified after the reported killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, in an earlier airstrike. If confirmed, the death of such a central figure would represent one of the most dramatic developments in modern Middle Eastern history. The supreme leader is not merely a political authority in Iran. He is the highest religious and constitutional authority, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and a symbolic anchor of the Islamic Republic system. His reported killing, alongside senior military commanders, would create immediate uncertainty inside Iran's leadership structure and potentially trigger swift retaliatory measures. In such a volatile climate, the Minab school strike carries enormous symbolic weight. Civilian casualties, particularly involving children, can rapidly shift international opinion and intensify calls for retaliation. For Iran, the tragedy may serve as a rallying cry, reinforcing narratives of external aggression. For its adversaries, even allegations of responsibility pose diplomatic and reputational risks. Regional actors are watching closely. Countries across the Gulf, already wary of instability in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil shipping routes, are assessing potential economic fallout. Hormuzgan province, where Minab is located, lies near this strategic waterway. Any escalation in the region could disrupt global energy markets, affecting oil prices and international trade. There are also concerns about proxy conflicts. Iran maintains alliances and influence through various armed groups across the Middle East, including in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. If Tehran determines that the Minab strike warrants retaliation, responses may not be limited to direct confrontation. Instead, asymmetric or proxy-based actions could emerge, expanding the geographic footprint of the conflict. Military analysts warn that in modern high-intensity warfare, miscalculation is one of the greatest dangers. When multiple parties operate in contested airspace, the potential for misidentification of targets, faulty intelligence, or technological malfunction increases significantly. In densely populated areas, even precision-guided munitions carry risks. The school's proximity, approximately 600 meters, to an IRGC base, underscores a central dilemma in contemporary warfare: the intersection of military and civilian infrastructure. If a military installation is considered a legitimate target under international law, nearby civilian facilities may still be endangered, particularly if strikes are carried out in urban or semi-urban environments. International law requires proportionality, meaning anticipated military advantage must outweigh potential civilian harm. Determining whether this principle was upheld in the Minab incident will depend on evidence that may not be publicly available for some time. Diplomatic channels are also under strain. In recent years, indirect negotiations between Iran and Western powers have addressed issues ranging from nuclear development to regional security. A civilian tragedy of this scale could derail any remaining pathways to dialogue. At the United Nations, calls for emergency sessions are likely. Human rights organizations may push for independent investigations. However, geopolitical divisions within international institutions often complicate unified responses. Veto powers and competing alliances can stall resolutions or dilute official statements. Meanwhile, global public opinion is being shaped in real time through social media and rapid news dissemination. Images of destruction, grieving families, and conflicting official statements circulate widely, influencing perceptions before formal investigations conclude. Financial markets are also reacting. Historically, instability in the Gulf region leads to volatility in oil prices, stock exchanges, and currency markets. Investors fear prolonged conflict, shipping disruptions, or direct confrontation between major powers. The psychological dimension cannot be overlooked. For civilians across the region, the sense that the conflict is widening and that schools, residential areas, and public spaces may no longer be safe creates an atmosphere of collective anxiety. Travel advisories may increase,
International airlines may reconsider routes. Businesses may suspend operations. Perhaps most significantly, the Minab tragedy highlights the fragile boundary between strategic military objectives and human catastrophe. When strikes occur near civilian centers, the line separating battlefield from community dissolves. In such circumstances, every incident carries the potential to spark broader escalation. The coming days will be critical. Will independent investigations clarify responsibility? Will diplomatic efforts de-escalate tensions? Or will retaliatory actions deepen the crisis? As global leaders weigh their responses, one reality is clear. The events in Minab have become more than a local tragedy. They are now a flashpoint in a confrontation that could define the region's future for years to come. The strike on the girls' school in Minab stands as one of the most heartbreaking moments in this rapidly escalating conflict. At least 153 lives, many of them children, were reportedly lost in a matter of seconds. Behind every number is a name, a family, a future that will never unfold. Classrooms that once echoed with lessons and laughter were transformed into scenes of devastation. Yet beyond the immediate grief, this tragedy has raised urgent and difficult questions. Who was responsible for the strike? Was the school deliberately targeted, or was it caught in the crossfire of a broader military objective near the IRGC base? Were adequate precautions taken to prevent civilian harm? And could the loss of so many young lives have been avoided? Iran has placed blame squarely on the United States and Israel. The United States says it is reviewing the reports. Israel says it is not aware of operations in the area. Meanwhile, independent verification remains limited due to restricted access and the challenges of reporting from within Iran. In the absence of confirmed findings, accusations and denials continue to collide, while families mourn. The tragedy also exposes the human cost of modern warfare. Precision technology and advanced intelligence systems are often presented as tools that reduce civilian casualties. Yet when military targets exist near civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, homes, even the smallest error can lead to catastrophic consequences. Inside Iran, public reaction reflects both unity in grief and division in trust. Some demand accountability from foreign powers. Others question their own government's preparedness and crisis management. The emotional shock of children dying inside a school has intensified scrutiny of both external aggression and internal safeguards. Regionally and globally, the implications are profound. The incident risks fueling further retaliation, widening the scope of military engagement, and destabilizing an already fragile region. Energy markets, diplomatic negotiations, and international alliances may all feel the ripple effects of what happened in Minab. But beyond strategy and politics, the central issue remains civilian protection. International humanitarian law exists precisely to prevent such tragedies. The protection of children, schools, and non-combatants is not optional. It is a fundamental obligation under the rules of armed conflict. As investigations move forward and global leaders respond, the world will be watching closely. Transparency, accountability, and restraint will be critical in determining whether this moment becomes a turning point toward de-escalation or a spark that ignites an even wider war. For now, Minab has become a symbol of the devastating human cost of geopolitical confrontation, a symbol of innocence caught in conflict, a symbol of how quickly tensions between powerful nations can shatter ordinary lives. And as the smoke clears and the world seeks answers, one truth remains undeniable. In every war, it is civilians, especially children, who pay the highest price.